For 2 years, I was the Miller's live-in son-in-law. For 2 years, I worked my fingers to the bone for them. But on Thanksgiving Day, my father-in-law, Robert, pointed a finger at my face and told me I couldn't eat at the main table. You're not family. You're not a Miller. You can eat the scraps in the kitchen. My wife and mother-in-law watched, their eyes cold as ice, telling me to just go along with it for the sake of peace. I didn't argue. I didn't make a scene. I just calmly went to our bedroom, picked up my suitcase, and walked out of their lives. 0-1 The air on Thanksgiving evening was thick with the scent of roasted turkey and simmering resentment. Outside, the first festive Christmas lights of the season blinked against the deepening twilight, their cheerful colors a stark contrast to the gloom settling over the house. Inside, the light from a crystal chandelier gleamed off a table laden with a Thanksgiving feast. Honey-glazed ham, slow-roasted turkey, garlic mashed potatoes, green bean casserole with crispy onions. Every single dish was the result of my labor, a marathon of cooking that had started at dawn. My father-in-law, Robert Miller, sat at the head of the table, his face flushed with wine. He raised his glass to my wife, Chloe, my brother-in-law, Ryan, and my mother-in-law, Susan. To us, he boomed, may the coming year bring even more success to the Miller family. They were a perfect picture of holiday cheer, their laughter nearly loud enough to shake the imported china. I walked out of the kitchen, carrying the last dish, a boat of homemade gravy. The moment I appeared, the smile on Robert's face froze. His brow furrowed in disgust, as if he'd just spotted a cockroach skittering across his pristine tablecloth. Just put it down and go. Who said you could stand there gawking? His voice wasn't loud, but it was a bucket of ice water, extinguishing the room's forced warmth. I set the gravy boat down and moved toward the empty seat at the far end of the table, the one that was always reserved for me. For 2 years, at every family dinner, that had been my designated spot. Sit? Who gave you permission to sit? Robert tapped his wine glass with a fork, the sharp ping cutting through the air. Do you know what day this is? It's Thanksgiving. This table is for the Millers. He looked me up and down, his eyes dripping with a contempt he didn't even try to hide. You're not blood. What gives you the right to sit with us for a family dinner? Susan chimed in, her voice sharp and acidic. He's right. Honestly, Ethan, you should know the rules by now. Go eat in the kitchen. There are plenty of scraps left in the pots. My brother-in-law, Ryan, was even more direct. He kicked the empty chair next to him, the legs screeching against the hardwood floor. Dude, don't be pathetic. Dad's letting you eat in the kitchen. Take the win and get out of here before you ruin the mood. I looked at my wife, Chloe. She was once the only light in my dark world. Now, she wouldn't even meet my eyes. She stared at a spot on the wall, her voice barely a whisper, but every word a perfectly aimed dart. Ethan, don't make a scene. It's a holiday. Can't you just keep the peace for once? My parents are just thinking about our family's reputation. Reputation. Always the reputation. For 2 years, I had sacrificed my own dignity for the sake of this family's reputation, living like a stray dog they'd taken in. I said nothing, forcing down the tidal wave of rage building in my chest. I just looked at them, one by one. I looked at their smug, self-righteous faces. They were a family of elegant executioners, slicing away my self-respect with the most civilized of knives. I smiled. Not a bitter smile, not a smirk. Just a calm, simple smile. Okay, was the only word I said. Then I turned, not toward the kitchen, but toward our bedroom. Behind me, I heard Robert's disdainful snort. And once you're gone, don't ever come back. I didn't look back. I opened the closet. It was mostly empty, save for a few of my old, faded shirts. My suitcase was already packed, tucked away under the bed. The 2-year term was up. Today was the day. Mr. Miller, I thought I did my best. I pulled the suitcase behind me and walked out of the prison that had suffocated me for 2 years. Just as the front door clicked shut behind me, I heard Robert's phone ring. It was the special ringtone he had for his boss, Mr. Wallace. I could hear his slick, sycophantic voice, slurred with alcohol. Mr. Wallace, happy Thanksgiving. What a surprise. What? What did you say? His voice suddenly shot up, cracking with disbelief and sheer terror. Which Mr. Cole? Our company. No, our entire parent company's Mr. Cole. You mean, my son-in-law, the real owner, Mr. Wallace. Wait, Mr. Wallace. I stood in the cold hallway, listening to the sounds of shouting and shattering glass from inside the apartment. A cynical smile touched my lips. 2 years. The show was finally over. Fragmented memories exploded in my mind like shards of glass. Flashback 1. The day I moved in, Robert laid down the law in front of all their relatives. Ethan, since you've married into the Miller family, you will live by the Miller family's rules. First, all the chores, cooking, cleaning, laundry, that's on you. Second, your paycheck gets deposited directly into the household account. Susan will give you a $500 monthly allowance. A man shouldn't have too much cash on him. Third, when you're out of this house, you remember that you represent the Miller name. Don't do anything to embarrass us. Chloe had been standing right there. She tugged my sleeve and whispered, Ethan, that's just how my dad is. Just try to put up with it. For her, I put up with it for more than 700 days. Flashback 2, Chloe's 26th birthday. I used my $500 allowance, saving for half a year to scrape together over $2,000. I bought her a Tiffany necklace she'd pointed out in a magazine months ago. At her birthday party, I gave her the gift. Her friends gathered around, gushing over it. One of them asked, Chloe, this must have cost a fortune. Your husband really spoils you. The smile on Chloe's face vanished. She picked up the necklace, held it up to the light, and then casually tossed it onto the table. Oh, this? It's probably a knockoff from an outlet. You know he doesn't have any money. Don't look at it, it's depressing. She then dragged her friends away to cut the cake, as if my gift wasn't a token of my affection, but a public humiliation. That night, I found a necklace in a drawer, tossed in with a bunch of old receipts and junk. Flashback 3, my brother-in-law, Ryan, racked up a $50,000 debt from online sports betting. The collection agency started calling the house. Susan burst into tears, pointing a trembling finger at my face. Ethan, are you a man or not? Your brother-in-law is in trouble, and you're just going to stand there? You've been working for years. Where are your savings? Use them to pay off Ryan's debt. I told her I had no savings, that my entire salary went to her. She slapped me across the face. Useless. Absolutely useless. We must have been cursed to have you join this family. If it weren't for us putting a roof over your head, you'd be starving on the street. Chloe was there. She didn't stop her mother. She just said, her voice flat and cold, Ethan, figure something out. Call your friends, borrow the money. We can't just let them break Ryan's legs, can we? In the end, I was the one who quietly settled that $50,000 debt through my own channels. To this day, they think some kind-hearted collector took pity on them and wiped the slate clean. The tide of memories receded, leaving only the cold, hard present. The motion-activated light in the hallway flickered off, plunging everything into darkness. I pulled out my phone, ignoring the dozens of missed calls and frantic texts. I dialed a number I knew by heart. Hello, Sophia. Mr. Cole, your orders. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and respectful. Send a car. Time for a pickup. Destination. I watched the last of the city's distant festive lights glitter against the night sky and uttered the 3 words. The ARIE Club. It was the most exclusive private club in the city, a gilded cage accessible only to those at the absolute peak of the pyramid. 2 years. Ethan Co. was back. 02 the Miller household descended into chaos. Robert collapsed into a mahogany dining chair. The wine glass slipped from his numb fingers and shattered on the floor. Expensive Cabernet bled into the Italian rug, mingling with his cold sweat. He gasped for air like a landed fish, his eyes webbed with broken blood vessels. No, it's not possible. Absolutely impossible. He muttered, repeating the phrase like a mantra, as if saying it enough would make it true. Susan scrambled toward him, grabbing his arms and shaking him violently. Robert, say something. What did Mr. Wallace say? What Mr. Cole? Who's the real owner? Are you drunk? Did you hear him wrong? Chloe's face was the color of ash. She clutched her phone, her knuckles white from the pressure. The festive atmosphere of minutes before had evaporated, replaced by a smothering, palpable panic. Wallace said, that Ethan is the secret owner of the entire Orion Holdings Group. Robert finally stammered out, each word costing him a mountain of effort. Bullshit, Susan shrieked, her voice turning hysterical. He's an orphan we practically picked up off the street. A piece of trash. Happy to be a CEO. Robert, have you lost your mind? Robert shoved her away and scrambled toward the door. He yanked it open. The hallway was empty, save for the muffled sounds of a football game and laughter from a neighbor's apartment. The outsider he had just banished was gone without a trace. With a trembling hand, he tried calling Mr. Wallace back. "We're sorry. The number you have dialed is not available at this time." The cold, automated voice was a hammer blow, shattering his last sliver of hope. Wallace had blocked him. What do we do? What do we do? Robert slid down the doorframe, landing in a heap on the floor. Chloe took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing herself to think. She found my number and dialed. "The subscriber you have dialed is unavailable or has turned off their phone." She refused to give up, opening WhatsApp and typing with frantic fingers. "Ethan, stop playing games. Come back. Mom and Dad know they were wrong. Where are you? Can we please just talk? Answer your phone." Her messages went out into the void, marked only by a single gray check. Delivered but not read. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a revolving restaurant atop the ARI Club. Beyond the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, the entire city glittered below, a river of light flowing at my feet. My executive assistant, Sophia Evans, stood beside me in a sharp, black power suit, delivering her report. "Mr. Cole, as per your instructions, the board of Orion Holdings convened an emergency virtual meeting. They have unanimously voted to terminate Robert Miller, a department manager at the subsidiary Summit Global Imports, effective immediately." She paused, then added, "The official reason for termination will be cited as gross misconduct and a profound lack of judgment, resulting in irreparable damage to the company's reputation." I swirled the red wine in my glass, saying nothing. My phone screen lit up with Chloe's messages. I didn't even open them. I simply swiped left and tapped delete. The motion was automatic, as familiar as taking out the trash had been for the past 2 years. Sophia handed me a neatly bound file. "Sir, this is a detailed accounting of all the funds transferred from your personal checking account. The one your $5,000 a month salary was deposited into, to the Miller household account over the past 2 years. The total comes to $120,000. Furthermore, these are the records of the $50,000 payment made through a third party to clear Ryan Miller's gambling debt. The evidence trail is complete. We are ready to file a lawsuit at your command." I flipped through the pages. Every transaction was a record of my sacrifice and their greed. Every line item was a testament to my humiliation. I looked out at the city lights, my voice calm. "Not yet. This is just the appetizer." I set down my wine glass and issued my next command. "Notify every partner bank of Orion Holdings. Effective immediately, freeze all credit lines and debit accounts registered to Robert Miller and his spouse, Susan Miller. Place them on the highest risk credit blacklist and terminate all current and future loan applications." A glint of admiration flashed in Sophia's eyes. "Yes, Mr. Cole," she replied, a hint of steel in her voice. Back at the Miller residence, after the initial wave of panic, Chloe had regained a semblance of composure. She helped her parents up from their puddle of despair, her voice filled with a self-assured, if flawed, logic. "Dad, Mom, stop scaring yourselves. We know who Ethan is. He's an orphan. What kind of powerful background could he possibly have? I think this is all a setup. He and that Mr. Wallace are in on it together. They're putting on a show to scare us, to get back at us for kicking him out." Yes, that has to be it. A spark of hope rekindled in Robert's eyes. His daughter's theory made sense. He was a respected department manager. How could he be brought down by his worthless, live-in son-in-law? That snake, Wallace, must have taken a bribe from Ethan to play along. That backstabbing son of a bitch. Robert slammed his fist on the table. "Just wait until after the holidays. When I get back to the office, I'll show him what happens to traitors." Susan quickly agreed. "Chloe's right. That little bastard is nothing but a liar. Once his little charade runs out of money, he'll come crawling back to us, begging for forgiveness." With this pathetic self-delusion, the family managed to survive the most terrifying Thanksgiving of their lives. They forced themselves to believe it was all an elaborate, empty threat. But a deep, gnawing unease had taken root in their hearts, a creeping vine of dread that was slowly squeezing the air from their lungs. The next morning, the crisp November sunlight did little to chase away the chill in the Miller home. As was his holiday tradition, Robert put on his expensive cashmere overcoat, preparing to go to a high-end grocer to buy a few gift baskets for his former mentors. It was his most important networking ritual of the year. At the checkout line, he confidently pulled out his platinum American Express card. Beep, beep, beep. The card reader let out a long, jarring error tone. The cashier offered an apologetic smile. "I'm sorry, sir, this card was declined." Robert's face darkened. "That's impossible. Try this one." He pulled out every card in his wallet. His debit card, his Visa, his MasterCard. One after another. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep, beep. Beep, beep, beep. Each jarring beep was like a slap across his face. The people in line behind him were starting to stare and whisper, "Sir, it appears all of your cards have been frozen," the cashier said, her voice now edged with suspicion. Face burning with shame, Robert snatched his useless plastic and fled the store. He ducked into an alleyway, his hands shaking as he dialed his bank's customer service line. The agent's voice on the other end was robotic and impersonal. "Mr. Robert Miller, good morning. Following a review by our risk assessment department, your personal credit rating has been downgraded to the lowest possible tier. You have been flagged as an extreme liability. As per your cardholder agreement, we have frozen all your accounts and reserve the right to call in all outstanding debts. To put it simply, sir, your credit has been destroyed." Credit destroyed. The words exploded in Robert's head like a thunderclap. He finally understood. Wallace wasn't joking. Ethan wasn't acting. A real storm had arrived, and they were standing directly in its path. He frantically started calling everyone he knew. The bosses he used to suck up to, the friends he drank with, anyone in his network he thought could help. The response was unanimous and chilling. They either hung up on him immediately or made flimsy excuses, their words laced with a sudden, awkward distance. It was as if he'd become contagious. Back home, Ryan's problems came knocking. Literally, several large, menacing men kicked the front door of the Miller's apartment clean off its hinges. They were the collectors for his gambling debt. The leader, a bald man with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck, propped his boot on their glass coffee table and casually flicked open a pocket knife. "Ryan Miller, word on the street, is your family pissed off someone important? My boss says that little grace period we gave you, it's over. The 50 grand you owe, plus interest, comes to 75. You pay up today, or we take a leg as a down payment." Ryan went pale, scrambling to hide behind his mother. Susan, trying to protect her son, puffed up her chest. "This is breaking and entering. I'm calling the police." The bald man chuckled, revealing a row of yellowed teeth. "Go ahead. Call them. Far as they're concerned, this is a civil dispute. But let me give you a little tip. My boss has friends in high places. When your son ends up permanently disabled, don't say we didn't warn you." Trapped and desperate, the family turned on each other. Ryan blamed his parents for kicking me out. Susan screamed at Robert for being useless, and Robert aimed all his fury at Chloe. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't insisted on marrying that worthless piece of trash, we never would have been in this mess." Chloe flinched under the weight of his words, tears of regret and humiliation streaming down her face. Left with no other choice, she started desperately trying to find me. She went to the first apartment we ever rented, a tiny walk-up in a less-than-desirable neighborhood. It's where we lived before the Millers came into money and moved into their luxury high-rise. The building's super told her, "Oh, that place? Someone bought it about a month ago." "Bought it?" Chloe was stunned. "Yep, a woman named Sophia Evans. Paid 30% over asking price, all cash. Must be one of those big-shot investors." Sophia Evans. The name hit Chloe like a punch to the gut. She'd heard that name before. The city's youngest and most formidable corporate lawyer, a top-tier venture capitalist, a legendary figure in financial circles. Why would someone like her buy the dump that she and Ethan used to live in? A terrifying thought began to form in Chloe's mind. She called in favors, reaching out to old university contacts, and finally got a lead. Ethan Cole might be at the ARI club. Clinging to this last shred of hope, she hailed a cab and raced across town. The club's gleaming bronze doors looked like a gateway to another universe. She tried to enter, but was immediately blocked by two imposing security guards in black suits. "I'm sorry, ma'am. This is a private, members-only establishment. I'm looking for someone. I'm looking for Ethan Cole," she cried, her voice cracking with desperation. The guards looked at her with a mixture of pity and contempt, but they didn't move an inch. Just as Chloe stood there, barred from entry, feeling like a pathetic joke, a black Rolls-Royce Phantom purred silently to the curb. The door opened, and I stepped out. I was wearing a bespoke Tom Ford suit, a Patek Philippe watch gleamed on my wrist, and my hair was perfectly styled. All the humility and weariness that 2 years with the Millers had ground into my posture was gone. In its place was the quiet, unshakable confidence of a man who was used to being in charge. Sophia Evans followed, holding the door for me with a deferential air. Chloe stared, speechless. She had never, ever seen me like this. She couldn't reconcile the powerful man standing before her with a husband who had shared her bed for 2 years. Snapping out of her shock, she lunged forward and grabbed my arm, her nails digging into the fine wool of my suit jacket. "Ethan," she was sobbing now, mascara running down her cheeks, her voice a ragged plea. "I was wrong. We were all wrong. Please just come home. Mom and Dad are so sorry. They know they made a mistake." I looked down at the hand clutching my arm. Then, slowly and deliberately, I pried her fingers off one by one. My eyes were completely blank, as if I were looking at a total stranger. "Miss Miller," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "You and I are done." The words Miss Miller struck her like a bolt of lightning. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Sophia stepped forward, positioning herself between us. She retrieved a document from her briefcase and held it out to Chloe. Sophia's tone was even colder than mine. "Chloe Miller, this is a petition for divorce, which Mr. Cole has authorized me to file on his behalf. And this," she added, producing a second document, "is a formal legal notice demanding the repayment of all personal assets illegally appropriated from Mr. Cole by the Miller family over the past 24 months. Please consider yourself served." Divorce papers. A legal notice. Every word was a razor's edge, slicing deep into Chloe's soul. She stared at the documents, the crisp white paper searing her eyes. She couldn't believe it. She wouldn't believe it. 2 years of marriage, over 700 days of shared life, all culminating in this cold, impersonal legal transaction. "No, I won't sign," she whispered, stumbling backward as if to escape the reality of the papers in her hand. She looked up at me, her eyes swimming in tears of protest and disbelief. "Ethan, how could you do this to me? I know my family wasn't perfect, and I know I wasn't always good to you, but was there really nothing between us? Was it all a lie? Have you forgotten my grandfather? Have you forgotten what he did for you?" She mentioned her grandfather, Mr. Miller, the man who had pulled me from the darkest period of my life, who had given me a second chance. The sole reason for my 2 years of silent suffering. For the first time, my calm facade cracked. The placid surface of my control shattered, revealing the jagged ice beneath. "Don't," I said, my voice low but carrying an undeniable weight of command. "You don't have the right to speak his name." Chloe froze, silenced by the sheer force of my anger. I stepped toward her, closing the distance until I could see the reflection of my own cold fury in her terrified eyes. "Why do you think I married you?" I asked, my voice a low, cutting whisper. "Did you think I was after your family's money? Their status? Your beauty? You give yourself and your family far too much credit. I endured 2 years of humiliation from you and your pathetic family for one reason, and one reason only, to repay the debt I owed your grandfather. On his deathbed, he held my hand and entrusted his only granddaughter to me. He knew your father was an arrogant fool, and your mother was a materialistic shrew. His dying wish was that I could watch over you for 2 years, hoping that some of my decency might rub off, that I could pull you out of the swamp your parents raised you in and help you become a better person. 2 years. I held up 2 fingers. I promised him I would protect you for 2 years. And I gave you every chance to prove him right, Chloe. On your birthday, I gave you a necklace I saved for months to buy, and you called it cheap trash in front of your friends. When your brother was in trouble, your mother demanded my non-existent savings while you stood by and told me to go into debt for him. On Thanksgiving, your father threw me out of the house like a dog, and you told me to keep the peace. I gave you more than enough chances. Every word was a hammer blow, striking Chloe's heart until it was bruised and broken. The color drained from her face, leaving a sickly, grayish pallor. So that was it. That was the truth. All this time, she thought I was the one who had married up, that I was the one who couldn't live without her. It had never once occurred to her that I was honoring a promise to a dying man, that I was trying to save her on behalf of the grandfather she adored. I took out my phone and played a voice memo I had saved for this very occasion. The weak, raspy voice of her grandfather filled the cold night air. It was the last conversation I ever had with him in the hospital. "Ethan, my boy, I'm so sorry for this. I know asking you to marry into my family is a great burden for a man of your caliber. But I just worry so much about Chloe. She isn't a bad person at her core, but she's been poisoned by her social climbing father and her materialistic mother. Help me. You have to help me pull her back. Show her what's truly valuable in this life." 2 years. Just 2 years. After that, no matter what she has become, you are free. This is the last thing your old friend will ever ask of you. The recording was short, but every word was heavy with the old man's love and desperation. Listening to her grandfather's voice, Chloe finally broke. Her body trembled violently, and a raw, guttural sob escaped her lips. She finally understood what she had lost. It wasn't just a husband she looked down on. It was a chance at redemption, an escape route her grandfather had paved with the last of his strength. "Unfortunately," I said, stopping the recording and pocketing my phone, my voice returning to its icy calm, "you single-handedly destroyed your grandfather's last hope. The moment you and your family threw me out like last night's garbage, my debt to the Millers was paid in full. From this day forward, we are even. We owe each other nothing." I turned to get into my car. As I did, Sophia's voice cut through the air, delivering the final, devastating blow. "Oh, and one more thing, Ms. Miller. I forgot to inform you. The company you work for, Summit Global Imports, and your favorite place to shop, the Oakbrook Galleria, where you hold a VIP black card. They are both wholly owned subsidiaries of Mr. Cole's private investment portfolio. So, as of tomorrow morning, you no longer have a job, and your VIP status has been revoked, effective immediately." Chloe's eyes widened in horror. She looked from me to Sophia, her expression a mask of utter devastation. Her career, the source of her pride, the luxury she used as a social weapon. Her entire world had been built and owned by the man she despised most. That realization was more crushing than the divorce papers, more painful than the legal summons. The strength left her legs, and she crumpled to the cold, unforgiving pavement. She hadn't just lost a husband. She had lost everything she had ever known. 05 Chloe returned home like a ghost, her spirit hollowed out. She tossed the divorce papers and the legal notice onto the coffee table in front of her parents. When she explained the real reason for my presence in their lives, her grandfather's dying wish, Robert and Susan were stunned into silence. They sat on the sofa like statues, unable to speak. They had preened and postured, believing they were performing an act of charity by sheltering a worthless stray. They never imagined they had kicked out a titan of industry, a man so far above them they weren't even qualified to look up at him. They had scorned and trampled upon the last gift their own father had tried to give them, a shield to protect them from their own worst instincts. Slap! Susan struck her own face, the sound sharp and ugly in the quiet room. "I'm such an idiot. A blind, stupid idiot," she wailed, tears of regret finally breaking through her hardened facade. Robert didn't cry. He just sat there, deflated, all the air and arrogance sucked out of him. He was thinking of what was to come. Ethan's revenge was only just beginning. He was right. The next day, Ryan's collectors returned. This time, they didn't waste time with threats. They dragged Ryan out of the apartment and, in full view of the neighbors, broke his leg with a tire iron. They ransacked the apartment, taking anything of value to settle the debt. When Robert tried to call the police, the officers who showed up just shrugged, classifying it as a civil matter and advising them to handle it privately. The collectors had connections, and no one wanted to get involved. Ryan lay on the floor, howling in agony, as Susan wept over him. The last vestiges of the family's respectability were gone. They decided to sell their luxury apartment to cover their mounting debts. But when they checked with the county registrar, they received the final, crushing news. The mortgage was in Robert's name. As soon as his credit was destroyed, the bank had foreclosed on the property. It was already scheduled for a judicial auction. The starting bid was so low it wouldn't even cover the outstanding loan. Their home, once a symbol of their success, was now the tombstone on their financial grave. The humiliation deepened. The news of Robert's termination spread through his professional circles like wildfire. The colleagues he once lorded over, the bosses he had flattered, were now openly gossiping about his family's spectacular downfall in industry-wide WhatsApp groups. Did you hear about Robert Miller? Turns out his son-in-law, the one he treated like dirt, is the actual owner of Orion Holdings. No way. You mean that loser Ethan? It's true. Robert was too arrogant to see it, kicked him out on Thanksgiving. Now the whole family is ruined. Serves him right. He was always such a condescending prick at the office. Karma's a bitch. Screenshots of these conversations were gleefully forwarded to the Miller family's relatives. Reading the vicious mockery, every word a poison dart, Robert felt his pride being flayed from his bones, shredded, and thrown to the dogs. The journey from a respectable upper-middle-class family to the laughingstock of the city took less than 3 days. The constant stress and profound shame were too much for Robert's body to handle. The world went black, and he collapsed to the floor, foam frothing at his lips. He'd had a stroke. In the sterile, antiseptic-smelling hallway of the hospital, Susan and Chloe waited outside the ICU, their eyes red and swollen. It was only then, in the terrifying silence, that Chloe truly understood. The man her family had mocked, belittled, and ordered around for 2 years had been the silent pillar holding up their entire world. When he was there, he had shielded them from every storm. The moment he left, the house came crashing down. 06 The hospital bills began to pile up. Robert had survived, but the prognosis was grim, and the daily cost of his care was astronomical. The family's accounts were empty, their assets seized. Susan pleaded with Chloe, her voice raw with desperation. "Chloe, please go find Ethan. Beg him. I'll get on my knees. I'll do anything. Just make him stop." Chloe just shook her head, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. Beg him? Well, why did she have to beg for anything? She was the one who had severed their last connection. Desperate, she decided to sell her collection of designer handbags and jewelry, the very items she once flaunted on Instagram. She laid them out on her bed. A Chanel classic flap, a Hermes Birkin, a Cartier love bracelet, a Tiffany necklace. Each one had been a badge of her vanity. Now, they were just a means to pay for a few more days of her father's life. At a high-end consignment shop, the owner examined her items one by one. "This Birkin is in excellent condition. I can give you $5,000 for it. This bracelet has some scratches. 2,000 tops." When he picked up a particular necklace, he paused, looking up from his loupe in surprise. "Ma'am, this piece. It's a limited edition, platinum and diamonds. The retail price alone was staggering, but now it's a collector's item. Are you absolutely sure you want to sell it?" Chloe froze. She recognized it. It was the Tiffany necklace I had given her for her 26th birthday. The one she had sneered at, called a knockoff, and tossed into a junk drawer. The owner informed her that its current market value was, conservatively, over $60,000. $60,000. How does a man on a $500 monthly allowance save up for a $60,000 gift? Chloe couldn't bear to think about it. She clutched the cold, heavy necklace, its weight a searing brand against her skin. She sank to the floor of the shop and wept, the kind of deep, soul-shattering sobs that come from a place of absolute regret. He hadn't failed to give her the best. She had simply been too blind to see it. In the end, she couldn't sell it. She put it on, the chain cold against her neck. It felt less like jewelry and more like a penance. She sold the rest of her luxury goods and paid the most pressing of her father's medical bills. Then, she got a job as a waitress at a busy downtown diner. She bussed tables, washed dishes, and mopped floors. The once pampered Chloe Miller, who had never done a day of manual labor in her life, now worked until her back ached and her hands were raw and red from hot water and cleaning chemicals. But for the first time, there was a quiet resolve in her eyes. One evening, as she was cleaning up after the dinner rush, a business news program was playing on the restaurant's TV. The guest being interviewed was me. On the screen, I was the picture of success, impeccably dressed, speaking eloquently about a new venture in renewable energy. The host smiled warmly. "Mr. Cole, you've achieved so much at such a young age. You're a true inspiration. But tell me, do you have any regrets? I was silent for a moment. The camera zoomed in on my face, capturing a flicker of something complex and unreadable in my eyes. I once made a promise to a great man, I said slowly. I promised him I would look after his most treasured possession. But I failed. I couldn't get that treasure to see its own worth. The restaurant was noisy, filled with the clatter of plates and the chatter of late-night diners. But to Chloe, my words cut through the chaos, each one landing like a physical blow. She was the treasure. She knew it. She covered her mouth and turned away, leaning against a cold, greasy wall as silent tears streamed down her face. This was worse than any public humiliation, more painful than any act of revenge. She finally understood. Ethan's cruelest punishment wasn't taking away her money or her status. It was forcing her to see, with perfect, agonizing clarity, exactly what she had thrown away. 0-7 time is a relentless force. It grinds down mountains and smooths the sharpest edges of grief. My life had moved on. Under my leadership, Orion Holdings expanded its reach, becoming a dominant force in global markets. My partnership with Sophia Evans became the stuff of industry legend. Rumors swirled that she was not just my right hand in business, but my future wife. We never bothered to comment. I established a charitable foundation in my personal capacity. I called it the Miller Grant. It was named for Chloe's grandfather. The foundation's sole purpose was to fund scholarships for brilliant students from impoverished backgrounds, students like I once was. On the foundation's first anniversary, I attended a fundraising gala as the guest of honor. The ballroom was filled with journalists, donors, and many of the students who had benefited from the grant, who had volunteered to help at the event. As I was about to take the stage, my eyes scanned the crowd and landed on a familiar, yet strangely different figure. Chloe. She was dressed in a simple, blue volunteer polo shirt and a baseball cap, her head bowed as she handed out programs to the arriving guests. She had lost weight. Her skin was tanned from a life lived outside the shelter of luxury. But the arrogance and entitlement that had once defined her were gone, replaced by a quiet humility forged in hardship. Our eyes met for a fraction of a second. She recoiled as if she'd been burned, quickly turning away to disappear into the crowd. I held my expression neutral and walked onto the stage. Halfway through the event, chaos erupted. A man with a noticeable limp burst through the security line and rushed the stage. It was Ryan. His leg was still in a brace, and he leaned heavily on a crutch, but his face was twisted with the same old venom and entitlement. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his voice echoing through the suddenly silent ballroom. "Ethan Cole, you ungrateful bastard. You backstabbing snake. If my family hadn't taken you in, you'd be nothing. Now that you're rich, you throw us away. You drove my father to a stroke. You have my leg broken. Do you have a soul?" His accusations sent a shockwave through the room. The journalists, smelling blood, swarmed forward, their cameras flashing like a violent electrical storm. Sophia immediately signaled for security to intervene, but I held up a hand, stopping them. I stood on the stage, looking down at Ryan, my expression unreadable. I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just a vast, empty indifference. But before security could reach him, another figure darted out from the crowd. It was Chloe. She ran to her brother, and with all the strength she possessed, she slapped him hard across the face. The sharp cracks silenced the entire room. Everyone, including Ryan, stared at her in stunned disbelief. "Chloe, you hit me," he stammered, his hand flying to his reddening cheek. Chloe's eyes were filled with tears, but she stood tall, her back straight for the first time in her life. She ignored her brother and turned to face the blinding wall of cameras. She took a deep breath and bowed. When she spoke, her voice was trembling but clear. "I'm so sorry for this disruption. My name is Chloe Miller. I am the ex-wife of Ethan Cole. Everything my brother just said was a lie. Our family wronged him, not the other way around. I was blind. I was a fool, and I failed to live up to the faith that both Ethan and my grandfather placed in me. My brother is a degenerate gambler who refuses to take responsibility for his own actions. Everything that has happened to my family is our own fault. It has nothing to do with Mr. Cole. Please, I'm begging all of you, leave him alone." On behalf of my entire family, I want to apologize to him and to everyone else we have hurt with our arrogance and our lies. Chloe's public confession was a bombshell that detonated across the city's media landscape. The next day, the headlines changed. Billionaire tyrant accused by ex-family became the secret son-in-law, a story of gratitude, betrayal, and a woman's public atonement. The narrative had completely flipped. My reputation emerged not only unscathed, but enhanced with a veneer of tragic nobility. I looked at Chloe, a flicker of something unreadable in my eyes. The vapid, weak-willed woman I had married was gone. In her place stood someone who, having lost everything, had finally found a spine. I didn't linger. I had Sophia handle the aftermath and left through a side exit. A few days later, Sophia went to the hospital where Chloe was visiting her father. She offered her a debit card. "Ms. Miller, this is from Mr. Cole," Sophia said, her tone softer than it had been at the ARI club. "He wanted me to be clear. This isn't for you or for your family. It's for your grandfather's medical expenses. A final payment on a debt of gratitude." The card contained $500,000, more than enough to cover Robert's long-term care. Chloe looked at the card for a long time. Then she looked up and gently but firmly pushed it back across the table. "Please thank him for me, Ms. Evans. But I can't accept this." Sophia raised an eyebrow in surprise. A sad, small smile touched Chloe's lips. "He was right. We're even. He doesn't owe us anything. My father's bills are my responsibility now. The Millers will pay their own debts. It's what we owe him, and it's what we owe my grandfather." For the first time, Sophia saw something in Chloe's eyes she had never seen before: dignity. She nodded and took back the card. "I'll relay your message to Mr. Cole." From that day on, Chloe lived by her words. She worked at the diner during the day and took accounting classes at a community college at night. She poured every spare dollar into her father's medical care and supported her mother. Occasionally, she would see news of me, or Ian Holdings entering a new market, the Miller Grant changing another student's life, me receiving another award. Each time was a sharp sting of what could have been. But the pain was no longer just regret. It was a clear-eyed understanding that we were worlds apart. That painful past became her motivation, a constant reminder that drove her forward and kept her from ever falling back in her old ways. Slowly, painstakingly, she began to earn back the self-respect she had so carelessly thrown away. 09, a year passed. A dreary autumn rain fell over the city. Robert's condition had stabilized, but the stroke had left him partially paralyzed and unable to speak clearly. He would spend the rest of his life in a wheelchair. Susan, aged by the ordeal, worked part-time at a grocery store to make ends meet. As for Ryan, his bad habits landed him in prison on illegal gambling charges, with a 3-year sentence. The Miller family, as it was, had ceased to exist. Chloe, however, had passed her certification exams. She found a job as a junior accountant at a small firm. The pay was modest, but it was enough to live on and slowly pay down the remaining medical debt. Her life was hard, but it was hers. One evening, she was waiting at a bus stop after work. The rain was coming down harder, and she huddled under the small shelter, her thin coat doing little to keep out the damp chill. A black Bentley Continental pulled up silently beside the curb. The tinted window slid down, revealing my face. I looked at her damp hair and her sensible, worn work clothes. "Get in," I said, my voice even. "I'll give you a ride." My tone was neutral, the kind one might use with a casual acquaintance. Chloe froze for a second. She looked at me, then at Sophia Evans, who sat in the passenger seat, watching her with a cool, appraising gaze. She was silent for a moment. Then, a faint, genuine smile touched her lips. It held no trace of her old manipulations, no hint of desperation. "Thank you, Mr. Cole," she said, "but I'm okay. I can get home on my own now." I looked at the calm, quiet independence in her eyes, an expression I had never seen on her face before, and I knew she was telling the truth. I nodded, not pressing the issue. "All right." The window slid up, sealing the two of us in our separate worlds. The car pulled away, merging back into the stream of traffic. In the rearview mirror, I watched her small, solitary figure standing in the rain, growing smaller and smaller until she was gone. "Let's go," I said to Sophia. She glanced at me, then looked ahead. "Of course, Mr. Cole," was all she said. My debt to Chloe's grandfather was paid, and Chloe, after losing everything, had finally found herself. The treasure, once buried under layers of pride and vanity, had finally, through its own power, begun to shine. And that was enough. Our story ended there. No reconciliation, no forgiveness. Just two separate lives moving in two different directions. It was the only proper farewell to a past that was better left behind.